Okay, so I know Formula One really wants to be more carbon neutral. They have their 2030 goal. So I think a great idea to achieve that sooner is to just have 24 races at Brazil.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Welcome back to Break Check. This is episode 36, our Brazilian Grand Prix recap. We went to bed thinking we were just going to be talking about George Russell's first win, the Mercedes 1-2, and we woke up with so much more to talk about. Like always, can't wait to get into it. Megan, how are you doing?
I'm great. Before we started recording, we had a quick 30-minute catch up of life and
this this
things.
fake this fake asking you how you're doing, this was the worst
Yeah.
feeling one because it was ceremonial at best.
Yeah, performative. It's fine. But no, I'm doing great. Just trying to get through grad school. It's only a few more weeks of the first semester, which is crazy to think that I'm already almost done with the first semester. I feel like I just got here. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, just hanging. How about you? How are
Nice.
you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Like you said, we caught up a couple minutes ago, just kind of figuring out what the rest of the year, what next year might look like.
Hmm.
Both podcast, personally, all that. We both
Yeah.
like we've said before, Megan and I, this is something we do on the side. We have completely, entirely full lives that are just kind of the main plot for us every day. But we are here to go over the Brazilian Grand Prix. Like we said, a lot to talk about. We have a little bit of news to go over, but we
Mhm.
wanted to go over a bit of a fun driver ranking thing we did last week and start away for this episode. You want to kick that off?
Yeah, so I saw it on Twitter. And shout out to the bias sorter who created the 2022 grid sorter, which is essentially a quiz where you compare two and two drivers, and there's a series of times that you're asked this until it gives you a generated list of your driver ranking. So I think we should go from bottom up. Do you have yours up?
Yes, I do.
Mine, my bottom four, I will say, are tied for last place, but I'm going to just go from whatever was listed at the bottom and move up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
My bottom four, or my last one, I don't
mhm,
is not actually my least favorite driver on the grid.
mhm.
Uh but I think just maybe my answer is just because I was picking, other drivers that I thought were better, maybe,
Mhm.
so that's all I had to lead
Yeah.
off with mine.
Yeah. My last one was Lance Stroll.
My 20th was Mick Schumacher.
Oh, come
I
on.
led off with he's not actually my least favorite on the grid. Just this algorithm put him there for me.
All right. Sure. Who was 19?
Lance Stroll was 19 for
No,
me.
okay.
He is my least favorite driver on the
Yeah.
grid.
So mine, yeah. And then my 19 was, or 17th also was Fernando Alonso, which is fair, I think, for me.
I think the next one of note that I think was kind of interesting, but I would
Hmm.
maybe flip. So at 15th, I had Joe, and 16th, I had Seb. I would probably switch those two. I do like Joe, but obviously, I
Hmm.
have a lot of respect for Seb and what he has done for the sport. So I think I
Yeah.
would probably rank him a little higher, even if I think he really needs a haircut. I think his hair looks terrible.
Yeah. It drives me crazy. Genuinely his hair because it's kind of upset. It looks like he's having a mental breakdown. You know what I mean? Like we know you're
Yes.
going through it right now, but like you don't have to, you know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think we're all pretty accurate. I would say Lando Norris was a little bit lower than I expected. He was 12th on mine, which I kind of thought he would be a little bit higher. But I guess it kind of makes sense. My third was actually tied. It was between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. We're tied for third. So,
Okay. So I have just a couple quick ones from the
mhm,
bottom to highlight. One,
mhm.
Latifi was 17th for me. And I have long said on the podcast he has grown on me, and
Yeah.
I think I'd put him there. I think I'd put him there, if not like
Yeah.
16.
Yeah, he was
Um,
I think he was the same for me. You're gonna hate who is the right above him though, for
oh,
me.
Checo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's no secret you're not the biggest
Yeah.
fan, but if it makes you feel any better, I have Charles Leclerc 13, and I think that's where he belongs
Wow.
on mine.
Really?
He,
Okay.
something. I
Hmm.
don't dislike him. I think
Yeah.
he's the first. He is like of the lower like rankings.
Hmm.
He's the first driver I would say I like,
Okay.
but maybe it's his fans. Maybe
It's
yesterday did not help. We can
no.
get into that later,
Yeah.
but yeah, Charles just not really doing it for me.
I was surprised. My fifth and sixth, my fifth was Mick Schumacher, and my sixth was Lewis Hamilton, which I still think I would switch because I do really like Lewis Hamilton. I just don't talk about him a lot because I feel
Yeah,
like it's kind of like an obvious person to like because of who. So I feel like with Mick, I kind of have to root for him a little bit more because he's a little bit more of a either you really like him or you hate him or like you just don't think he's good. And so I feel like I have to defend him a little bit more.
yeah.
But my first two were obvious. It was Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian Vettel. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
My top five was pretty flawless, I think. So my number one was Lewis. My number two was Checo. My number three was Daniel. My number four was Carlos, and my number five was Bottas, who
Yeah.
sneakily I have actually been a really big fan of. I think I bring
Yeah.
him up a lot.
Yeah. Bottas, actually, that's a good call out. Bottas was 15th on mine, but I think I would put him higher, like maybe seventh or eighth. Because
Yeah.
Albon was seventh for me, which I do really like Albon, but I don't know. I still think Bottas should have been higher on my list.
Uh, my parting words on this little bit. Max Verstappen came in at
Mhm.
ninth for me, and I
Okay.
thought that was accurate. I think after yesterday, I would drop him down.
See, this is like a really good exercise to do right before we talk about everything that happened yesterday because so much happened and really changed how I feel about some of these people, just the way situations were handled, things like that.
I think we saw some true colors yesterday after the
Oh yeah.
race.
Few pieces of new news before the Brazilian Grand Prix kicked off. Hamilton was made an honorary Brazilian, I guess it was, which is super
Yeah.
exciting for him. Yeah. The whole ceremony. He was dressed very nicely. So that's good for him. And then it was actually announced. It's been announced, but apparently the Hulkenberg moving to Haas driver for 2023 is expected to be announced on Wednesday, which I think we all kind of saw coming. I think at this point it's best if Mick gets out of the Haas, just given that they don't really seem to believe in him anymore.
Mhm.
But he is rumored to be a consideration for the Mercedes and the Alpine reserve driver positions. It seems as if Daniel moves to Red Bull and is a reserve driver for them, then Mercedes would then take Mick. And if not, and say Daniel did go to Mercedes, then it seems Mick would be the reserve driver for Alpine. I don't know if you had any thoughts on all that bit.
I was reading a little bit. It does seem like Daniel's going to Red Bull.
Yeah.
I think that's not officially announced, right? But
No.
it should be soon. So I would like to see Mick at Mercedes. I
Mm-hmm.
think they'll be better next year, so he'll get to do stay sharp in a fast car.
Yeah.
Which if a better team wants him, I think he'll be better for it in 2024.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think it was Toto who was talking about it and how it's not instead of looking at it as Mick moving backwards, is him kind of moving sideways. This is a way for him to kind of gear in, learn from a really competitive car, and just kind of gain some insight, maybe get whatever he needs to do, whether it's like pick up speed, just like get kind of back in the zone, have some better leadership, some
Yeah.
better people to learn from. I'm confident that he'll come back. I definitely see him going into the coming Sauber or Audi team in the future. So I don't think he's out of F1 forever. I mean, I think we've seen what Ocon come back and forth. There's a few drivers.
After a year as a Mercedes reserve.
Yep. And then even Albon, he was the reserve for Red Bull when he was kicked out of his full-time seat, and now he's back and doing great. So I actually think this break might be good for him, especially, just with everything that's happening with Haas. I'm also curious to see how Hulkenberg does, because I did like him when he was in F1, but it's also been like 2 or 3 years. So kind
Yep.
of curious to see how that compares to his performance now. But we'll see.
Mercedes is also a world-class organization. I think they take care of their people, and I think that's how an F1 team should run. Haas
Yeah.
is not, I don't think. I know
No.
I know Gunther is funny. We like Kevin.
Mhm.
But Haas is the last bit from like stable and consistent. I
Oh
know they're a
yeah.
little more stable financially now, but I think it'll, like you said, it'll be good for Mick to get out of that and see what a real F1 team works
Yeah.
like.
Plus his dad he's not only affiliated with Ferrari, but he raced for
Mhm.
Mercedes for a bit too. So I think just having that kind of more family aspect too, and I think if you're going to pick, between Mercedes and Ferrari in this day and age, I think learning from Mercedes is
Yeah.
going to be his best bet. Also, speaking of Ferrari, my other note that I wanted to bring up was that Binotto's job is actually at risk. They are considering other people for his position right now, just given the inconsistency of performance, the direction, and how poorly pretty much that they've done the second half of this season. They should not be this close to Mercedes right now. So after that Mercedes 1-2, it kind of started the ball rolling with considering other people for his seat.
Yeah. About time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone's that upset. So
No.
I think, unless something changes early next year, I could definitely see him out, you know, come 2023, 2024. But that's all I had for news.
Yeah. So God, where do we start for this race? So we can start with the
I start
easy
with
thing. George
yeah.
Russell, first time race winner. Mercedes 1-2. The long-standing streak of Brits winning an F1 race continues. Maybe not the Brit that we expected.
Right.
As we'll get into Max's nosedive onto Lewis that kind of kept him from
Yeah.
winning the race. Initial thoughts, what do you think?
I mean, I will say, I think even after the race restart, when it was pretty much George versus Hamilton at the beginning, I think George did a great job holding him off, and to just
Mhm.
see him be that see a little bit of that competition between the two. One, good sportsmanship between the both of them, and
Yes.
then also great to see George finally win. I think he's had a great season, and he's been so consistently there that it was only a matter of time. And so I think he wholeheartedly deserves it, and it was great to see a Mercedes finally up there this year.
Yeah. I'm obviously a huge Mercedes fan,
Mm-hmm.
huge Lewis fan. I obviously would have liked to see him win, but
Yeah.
I think that this was best case scenario for Mercedes.
Especially after that crash
Yes.
with or the touch
Yeah,
point. Yeah,
yeah.
get into it.
So what I mean by best case scenario is I Lewis was, I think, if he did not get crashed into by Max, I don't think George would have held him off the whole race. I think Lewis
Yeah.
would have won. However, the crash happened. I'll get into that after.
Mm-hmm.
George has a great performance, tops off his great first season with Mercedes with a
Mm-hmm.
win, uh, solidifies himself as the future of Mercedes moving forward. And even though he did not win, Lewis
Mm-hmm.
gets to see this team and this car is still competitive. He knows he was faster. He was going to win before the crash. You
Mm-hmm.
get Lewis revitalized. He was ecstatic after the
Yeah.
race. I don't know if you saw any of his post race
Mm-hmm.
interviews. You get a revitalized Lewis who was really encouraged after this performance, is going to have him coming back next year ready to compete. And you get George his first win, who just probably is the biggest self-esteem boost he could have. And really,
Yeah.
like I said, just solidifies him as the future.
It's really putting Mercedes in a good position for next year. I think after the tumultuous season that they've had, this is exactly what they needed to end the season, regardless of how they do in Abu Dhabi. I think this is what they really needed to happen to have that motivation for next year and not feel so discouraged from everything that's gone on,
Yes.
especially earlier in the season with them. So I cannot wait to see how they do next year. I think they're going to come in swinging. While I do want to see more teams also on the grid, I would love to see more teams on the podium than just those three. But
Yeah.
it'll be great for Mercedes, and I think the other team should be definitely keep an eye out because yeah.
Yeah, and this end to Mercedes season is what both of us wanted to see from Ferrari. Far
Mm-hmm.
from it yesterday. I was a little upset, not upset. I was a little off put by Charles really, really wanting that position
Mm-hmm.
from Carlos. Carlos in third, Charles in fourth. Like I think it was Crofty said on
Mm-hmm.
television, teams in a championship hunt,
Yeah.
world driver or constructors, they will allow drivers to swap positions to help someone, but you
Yeah.
can't take a podium away from your teammate.
Especially when it wasn't going to make one that significant of a difference. Two, it wasn't that Charles is even fighting for the championship anymore. If this was a championship situation like last year at the Mexico Grand Prix, right? Perez should have won that, but they switched him
Yeah.
and Max pretty much because Max needed the points for the championship, which ultimately made a huge impact in the future races
Which we
because
will be getting into after.
yeah. But it's those are situations where it makes sense to switch, especially when it comes to like a podium or a win or whatever. But
Yeah.
situations like this where you really didn't need it. And I think it was impressive enough for Charles to come back the way he did, especially after getting clipped by Lando and hitting something and then having to start from the bottom. I think he should be proud of fourth. I think fourth was the best he was going to get in the situation he was in. And
Yeah.
he really, I mean, it showed how talented Charles is. I think that was an incredible drive from him, but it doesn't excuse how great Charles was doing or Carlos was doing either,
Carlos.
because Carlos had an incredible race too, and third was also the best he was going to get. So why take that from him? I just thought it was kind of yeah. I think Charles is getting frustrated with Ferrari, but I think he was directing it to the wrong person, which is Carlos, and it
Yeah.
shouldn't be.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I know Max has committed to helping Checo next race. Carlos has also committed to helping Charles next race. They're
Mhm.
so close, and they kind of have been all year. I
Yeah,
kind of just want to see Charles and Checo just race straight up for it in
battle
Abu
it.
Dhabi. Like just
Yeah.
let whoever wins win at this point.
Mhm.
And I know the teams aren't going to do that, but I think
No.
it'd be entertaining for an otherwise anticlimactic race this year.
Right. I mean, it's not going to be like Abu Dhabi last year,
No,
right?
yeah,
So honestly, I would love to see, Charles or Checo have a pole position, like a 1-2 of those two at
yeah,
Abu
yeah,
Dhabi and let them, just let them go at it.
yeah.
I think Charles should have the one because the Red Bull's faster, but
Mhm.
I think also, but at the same time, Perez is better at defending, I think. So
But that's what I mean. I think they have extremely. We've seen some really good battles between Charles and Checo. They have very opposite skill sets. That
yeah.
Charles is obviously one of the fastest drivers on the track. Checo nearly impossible to get around at times.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
like you said, if they could go qualify 1-2, Max and Carlos can hands off,
Just
just
one.
let them go at it. Hopefully, not hopefully, but
I mean,
Mercedes might spoil the party. But yeah,
yeah. But
I'm excited to see them race next week.
yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be like last year. I remember it was pretty much a battle between Carlos, Charles, and Lando for, I want to say it was like fourth, fifth, and sixth, or no, fifth, sixth, and seventh in the standings. And they were what 3.5 points from each other, Charles and Carlos
Mhm.
was the one on top. And it was great though, because they were all so close to each other all season. And so
Yeah,
watching Abu Dhabi, I mean, other than the craziness that was Lewis and Max, it was also a really great battle between those three guys because they were
yeah,
all so close all season and they all have very different driving styles.
yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah.
Carlos has really come into his own in the back half of
Hmm.
the season.
Hmm.
Very excited for him next year and to kind of see what he can do as well.
Yeah, I really think a Ferrari, if they can keep those two together for the next few years, I think that they will be like similar to Mercedes with those with Lewis and George for a few years. I think those two could be really, really strong teams if they're able to, one, deliver the results that they're promising these drivers, but then two, keep the relationship between the two drivers strong, because that is
Yeah.
something that Red Bull you regularly see become an issue, which we can get into if you want to
Yes.
talk about Red Bull next.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, I know these are not normal jobs they have, but
Right.
it comes down a little bit to just your corporate culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Red Bull has just had this win at all costs culture for so long
Yeah.
that it's just not conducive to a healthy work environment. And we saw that just explode yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll try not to get too carried away. Obviously, uh, yesterday in the race, Max was in sixth, Checo was in fifth.
Mm-hmm.
Checo was the only person in the top 8 on mediums. Everyone else was on soft, so he was not catching anyone. So
No.
they let Max pass him into fifth to see if he could go catch Alonso to just take some points off.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the agreement that if he did not catch Alonso, Checo and Max would flip back again. Max did not catch Alonso and then did not give Checo the place back. If you heard the radio, it was a lot like, "Hey, Max, why are you not giving him the place back?" Nothing. "Max, why are you not giving him the place back?" And he said, "I actually don't think I will be doing that. I've,
Yeah.
given my reasons why."
He's like, no, actually. So stop
So
asking.
it later comes out that there are reports that Checo crashed on
Deliberately.
purpose
Yeah.
in the Monaco Grand Prix, which I want to lead off with. If he did, he should be punished. Secondly, I want to say that there is a lot of people just reporting that as fact, and that's a very,
That's
very heavy allegation.
yeah.
Thirdly, if he did crash on purpose, why? He did not have pole. He would not, I don't think he would have risked disqualification, penalty points, constructor penalties for a third place qualifying spot at Monaco.
I think it was more to mess up Charles's, right? Or no?
I, Max is, it seems from what I'm reading
Mhm.
that Max is under the impression that Checo tried to sabotage him.
Oh, right, right, right. And apparently it's reported that Perez admitted that at Monaco, but like, why also wait until now for to do something? You know what I mean? Like to get
Yes.
revenge. That's like where I'm getting confused about this allegation Monaco was 6 months ago. It was back in May, wasn't it? Like, why would Max wait all of this time to get back at Perez for something that happened in Monaco?
And they genuinely seem to get along otherwise. So
Mm-hmm.
this just, like I said, if Perez did it, he should be punished just
Right.
straight up. There's no way around it. But I just don't get it. If it was a deliberate Checo
Mm-hmm.
decision, why on earth would he ever admit it ever to anyone? And then if it
Yeah.
wasn't, and they were trying to stop Charles, then
Mm-hmm.
it came from Red Bull and was communicated to Checo and not Max.
Yeah.
And at the end of all of this, Checo has done so much for Max over the last 2 years. I don't know if there's been a second driver that has provided so much assistance to the championship driver so willingly. Because,
In the consistency of it.
yes, giving up a win at your home race, holding up Lewis until you catch up to him.
Risking your entire race at Abu Dhabi last year, Perez dropped because I mean he still was good in the standings, but he ended up out the entire race because he was pushing and pushing and pushing. So
I it I think accusations of cheating and crashing
mhm.
aside, I think we saw a really, really ugly side of Max yesterday. That's very
Yeah.
disappointing because I thought he was maturing throughout the entire year. And yesterday, what I saw was not a two-time world champion. I saw just a kid who has a lot of power at a fast racing team who is holding grudges.
Just he wanted it
against his biggest supporter.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's not even, it wasn't even for like a championship win. He has everything secured. He didn't need the points. He didn't need, it was also, they were fighting for 6. It was 6 and 7. It wasn't anything significant. So why he was throwing a fit, I just feel like there's so much more underlying that we don't even know between the two, because the way that both of them talked on the radio and how they spoke of each other, even in the interviews after the race, there seems to be a lot more going on, and it seems like it's starting to blow. So next season is going to be extremely interesting, because Perez is under the impression he has done everything he can, which is not wrong. Like, he's done everything to help Max win these championships. I don't think Perez is going to play the same nice guy game next season. And to be fair, he shouldn't, because if he's capable of winning more and more races, and he's capable of driving like he has been this season, go for it. Because I think Red Bull has been creating this very negative environment where they pick the golden boy and then just expect the other guy to do everything they say and do all the time. And you saw Bottas at Mercedes a few times, do his own thing instead, like when he went for the fastest lap and stuff. He would constantly defy things because he kind of got sick of it. And so I think Perez is hitting that wall too, where he's kind of done.
Right. Yeah. Up until this point, I don't know if he's ever defied a team order.
No, I don't think so.
And, like you said, next year, I hope this lights a fire under his ass. I think, obviously, Charles and Lewis, I think, are the next biggest threats to Max, repeating again. But in a vacuum, Checo is kind of the first option to compete with Max. He's in the same car. I know it's not tailored to his strengths, and they'll never strategize in his favor. But I mean, he's one of the only drivers. I mean, Charles and Checo are the only drivers. Obviously, George just won, but before this week, they were the only drivers to take a win off Max. I hope both of them come back and have strong years next year.
Yeah. But it's also, I want Checo to go for it, like Sweden next year, but it also, at the same time, by doing that, he's risking his seat, because his contract isn't it up after next year, or
he got extended.
Oh, for another. Okay,
yeah. So if they cut him, they have to pay him.
That's true. But I could see if it's getting to the point where Perez is doing his own thing and becoming more of a threat, I could see them dropping him early. Like, I could definitely see them considering that, because they've done it before. I mean, they've switched drivers mid-season, so
you will never get a Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg situation at Mercedes or at Red Bull, because they won't
put up with it.
I don't think they would let Checo race him.
No.
So, Max is an aggressive offensive driver. He's fast and he's aggressive about it. If their relationship is spoiled and Checo is ever in front of Max and Max is trying to get around, I genuinely think Checo would just spoil everyone's race 100%. And just not let him around.
It is sad though with Max, just because I think this whole season we've talked about how much growth there has been with Max and how much of a likable guy he's been and how he's growing on both of us. And yesterday it was just kind of like, oh, wow, that's kind of ugly. That's kind of gross. Like, the way you're speaking of a teammate and the way you're handling orders, it's kind of selfish, And same with Charles. I think both of those two drivers were a bit selfish yesterday in the way that they spoke and handled the situations they were in. So
we haven't even talked about Max's move on Lewis.
And we haven't even talked about Magnussen's pole position from qualifying.
Oh my gosh, what a week.
Or the Alonso interview with Ocon. This is foreshadowing.
Ocon's radio?
Oh, Ocon's radio?
Before we move on from Red Bull, I wanted to touch on the contact that was made between Max and Lewis. Max got 2 penalty points. Said Lewis did not leave him enough room. This is going back to a new rule that the FIA is enforcing, where generally, if you have your 2 front tires, at yeah, I think more than halfway of the
Mhm.
car you're trying to pass, when you hit the apex, they have to leave you room.
Yeah.
I don't quote me on this, but I believe the new rule is you can't just have your two tires up where they need to be at the apex. You have to do it safely. And they ruled
Mm,
that Max did it unsafely. He just braked really late to get his tires where they should
yeah.
be, and then expected Lewis to provide the space, which Lewis is not obligated to do so
Yeah.
anymore. So Max got 2 penalty points. Lewis and him, they bumped. They both had to pit, kind of ruined both of their races.
Mhm.
Whatever racing incident, and it happens. After the race, Max was asked about it and essentially said that, yeah, he did it on purpose because this race meant nothing to him. And he knew that it would, I mean, he knew
It
Lewis was
would
going to
ruin.
win and it
Yeah.
would ruin his
Which
race.
is so bitter. Like you won the championship last year. Lewis has had nothing this year. Give it to him. Like, come
And
on.
then did not let his teammate pass.
And it's like, so it means nothing to you, but
Yeah,
you couldn't give it to Perez, who it was rightfully his. Yeah.
really disappointing week for Max.
Yeah.
Like really
Tough,
disappointing.
tough way to end the second to last race of the season. Um, also tough race for real quick. I want to talk about Haas just because there isn't too much, but there was a lot at the same time.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a Haas sandwich after qualifying with Mick at the very bottom because of the way he timed his racing, and then for Q1, but then incredibly, Magnussen in Q3 for qualifying. And this was also to set up the sprint race for Saturday. So, mind you, this was the last sprint race weekend. So, qualifying happened on Friday. And during Q3, it started to get really dark because the rain was coming in. So, everyone wanted to try and get their times in early. Magnussen was first on the track. His team did great at getting him out right away.
Yeah.
And he managed to set a pretty decent time. And behind him, there's Max Verstappen, who had a lockup in turn 8, which prevented him from going any faster than he did. So he was, I think, second in the timing. And then while some of the other drivers are like getting the hang of it, Charles is trekking on wet tires while everyone's on slicks. Um,
He
you
was the
see
only driver to not get a lap in on slicks.
was so embarrassed. Poor guy, man. You see his faces sometimes on Twitter, and I feel like he's aged 10 years this season just from the
Yeah.
decisions. You can tell he's sick of it. But George then just goes on a little field hunt and starts porpoising down the off the track and cause the red flag. So with that and all happening, that left Magnussen still in first position for qualifying. And while they were waiting for the flag to end, it started pouring rain. So teams decided, they're like, you know what, we're gonna take it. We're not gonna go back on track. We're
A
not. We're
couple
done.
tried.
Yeah, Lewis. You just see Lewis in the pouring rain, like going around the
Yeah.
track by himself, and he came in after a lap because it was just too much. So solidified Magnussen's first pole position, which was incredible. His radio was super sweet. The hug
Yeah.
between him and Gunther was really cute too. Tough qualifying for Mick a bit, but it was really great to see Magnussen. I feel like he's been doing nothing the past couple of races, like not like in a bad way. It's just like I just don't notice him because he's
He's
not doing
participating.
anything. He's just, yeah, he's like just
Yeah.
waving his flag, but like at least like somewhere in the middle of the grid. So
Mhm.
it was cool to kind of see something come up from him, after being out for a year and then
Yeah.
coming in last minute. It was, yeah, really exciting. But unfortunately, his race ended really early in lap 1 because he had a collision with Daniel Ricciardo, who is also at one of his final races of his career potentially. So Daniel received 2 penalty points towards his license and has a 3-place grid penalty for the final race due to his collision with Magnussen. So tough for him. That's like, I think, his second race in a row where he's gotten penalty points. I believe he had penalty points at the last race. But I mean, it doesn't really matter for next year. So
Yeah.
there's that. And then also during the sprint race, Stroll had a 10-second penalty because he forced Vettel off the track when he also reacted to defending late. And this is where I get really frustrated with Stroll and why I think it's valid he was last on my ranking
Yeah.
because he doesn't seem to learn from his mistakes, and he's been in Formula One for a few years now. So like all these like rookie mistakes, he has no excuse for. And after that scary collision with him and Alonso at the US Grand Prix, it's just shocking and disappointing to see the way he's defending now still, because he's doing the same thing. And you saw that even on the race on Sunday where Mick couldn't pass, or during the sprint race where Mick couldn't pass Stroll because Stroll kept going in late. And if Mick didn't back off, he would have been hit the same way
Yeah.
Alonso was. And it's so infuriating to see drivers like that drive so poorly and immaturely. And I've been talking a hot minute, so if you have any thoughts on that, let me know, because it was really bothering me this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to really say about Stroll. I think we know who he is, what he is. When he makes mistakes, he doesn't think he does. So I don't think you can learn from them if you think you're doing the right thing. I don't know how that's going to work with Alonso next year.
I did
I,
text
I
you.
I really don't know. And you said you're back on the Alonso hate train, and that Alonso or Stroll is just a worse Alonso, I think you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, it was Stroll. Alonso is an older version of Stroll, but he knows how to drive and like come back from his mistakes.
Yeah.
Because Alonso, you saw him, he also got a penalty from the sprint race. Just hopping into Alpine now. He also had a 5-second penalty and 2 points to his license from his clash with Ocon during the sprint race. After the sprint race, he was quoted saying he only has one more race finally, as if,
Mm-hmm.
working with Alpine and working with Ocon has been the worst part of his entire career, which I think is pretty absurd. And
Yeah.
I don't know what's happened between him and Ocon. I thought they got along fairly well. So it's kind of shocking to see them hate each other pretty much so much, just
Yeah.
the way that they duel it out. Um, but he did start 18th on Sunday and was able to finish fifth. So Alonso still has it in him. It's just the way he works with people. It seems quite difficult.
Yeah.
So, and that's also why I compared him and Stroll, because he also seems to make very ridiculous mistakes, especially because he's been in the sport for so long, and he still will make questionable decisions on the track and then usually not take responsibility for it and or blame other people, even though he's
Yep.
the one that receiving the penalty. So we'll see.
We'll see how that goes
Two
next
hot
year.
heads together.
I think Aston Martin, the car, is going to
Mhm.
catch us a little off guard. It seems maybe like they are going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Car has been performing, but also I don't know if that's just because Seb has been driving.
Right.
So
Because Seb's been great the last
yeah,
couple of
yeah,
races.
yeah, he's been mixing it up. He's been in there,
Yeah.
but yeah, Ocon's radio, they were begging him not to race against Alonso. I couldn't really understand, but
Mm-mm.
he did not seem to be wanting to comply.
Yeah, I'm looking. I think I had a quote in here. Yeah, he was pretty much fighting back. He's like, let me drive, let me fight. He's like, I know what I'm doing. He'll be fine, like, whatever.
Yeah,
And they're like, no, like, don't. They're like, he
yeah,
has fresher tires, let him through.
right,
But
right.
I will say it was pretty funny because Ocon was passing quite a few people on the track yesterday or on Sunday. And when he was passing Gasly, someone on the radio goes, yeah, Gasly over here, easy prey in the AlphaTauri, and then and then you just see Ocon, no problem, pass him, and I was like, man, they're gonna be a team to watch too, because I know they don't have great history, and I'm
Yeah.
sure Gasly is pretty ready for a more competitive car, but working with Ocon, it'll be interesting to see how those two go together.
Before we finish up, because I think we are wrapping up,
Mhm.
something I saw some whispers of, don't know if anything materialized. Pierre was at risk of missing a race because of penalty points. I did
Mhm.
not realize he had that many.
Yeah, he has 10. He only needs two more and he's like done.
Yeah,
And someone said they were like, oh, like finish your penalty points now and like miss Abu Dhabi so you can start fresh next year with Alpine, because he's going to have a tight race until May, because
yeah,
that's when his first like set of points are finally like
expires.
diminished. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so worth keeping an eye on, especially with him and Ocon as teammates.
yeah,
Uh,
that's
then it'd be tough. So it sucked for him to have to start his time at Alpine with his hands
mhm.
tied behind his back a little bit.
But I mean, okay, to be fair, I think the FAA have been a bit harsh on Gasly because I think Gasly has rightfully called them out on things.
Yeah.
And I think that they're a little bit biased in who they give points to and how many.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of like getting a ticket from the police, right? Like if I'm speeding 20 miles an hour and 9 times out of 10 I don't get caught, and then I get caught that one time, I can't be mad. Like I
Yeah.
knowingly went 20 miles over the speed limit. So like the way I see it, it's like you're kind of taking that risk by some of the decisions you're making on the track. So like
Mhm.
maybe just don't do illegal things on the track, and like
Yeah.
maybe then you won't get penalty points, so like some things obviously like happen, and it's like the Daniel Magnussen situation. They did say, it wasn't a malicious, like it wasn't a poor act necessarily from Daniel, like they understand like where he was coming from, it was just like a misjudgment, but because it was so late into the first lap, they couldn't rule it just the first lap incident, so they had to
Yeah.
kind of give him the points.
Yeah.
So there's situations like that too, but I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. It's like, well, like you could drive a little better, but also I understand they're kind of targeting you a little bit.
So yeah, I think that wraps up our race recap.
Mhm.
So much stuff to talk about. We got through it pretty well, I think.
Yeah, there was a lot. So yeah.
Yeah. We have one last race coming up, Abu Dhabi at 7 a.m. for me. I haven't had one of those in a while. I've been a little spoiled the last couple of weeks.
I'm ready for a nice afternoon race. I'm over the 9 p.m. Sunday races, so very excited for this.
For the
But
last time this season, any predictions?
ooh, I mean, honestly, it would be great to see someone other than Max win. Maybe a Lewis win, kind of rebrand himself from last year. Even though it won't mean a championship win, but it would be great to see Lewis on the podium. If not, I still think he'll be in the top three.
Yeah.
Maybe Mick points to end out his season.
Yeah. I'd like to see some Daniel points to end the season.
Vettel points. I want Vettel in the
Yeah.
points. I'm not mentally okay to lose Daniel, Seb, and now probably Mick this year. So if we could just see all three of them finish in points, I will be in bliss.
I will say I do not think we will see a Max victory because I think he will be finishing behind Checo.
Yeah.
I think my biggest wish, I want Checo and Charles to be 1-2 going into the last bit of the race, and just even tires, just have them go at it.
Yeah, that would be great to see.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this has been episode 36. Follow us at BreakCheck F1 on all socials if you have not yet. We will be posting throughout the week as usual. Any parting words?
No, I don't. I really don't. I have no words in my head. So
Megan has no thoughts in her head. I think that's a good call to end the episode. See you next week.